Dear Vice President Katainen, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear students, it gives me a great pleasure, and I also regard it as a real honor to welcome Vice President Katainen today here at the College of Europe. I think it's your first official visit to the college, and very much appreciated that you take out the time out of your busy agenda. Well, Vice President Katainen has, as you surely are aware, had a very distinguished political career in various functions. By academic background, it's always nice to mention the academic background in an academic institution. He is a social scientist, and already quite early he developed an interest in European politics. And the first major function which already at the age of 19, which he acquired, was that of the Vice President of the Youth of the European People's Party. 19 years old, so quite an early start. Then Vice President Katainen went through a number of responsibilities at the national level. He was elected to the Finnish Parliament in 1999. He became first Vice President of the Regional Council of Northern Savonia, which means you have also an experience in regional politics. Then you became Vice President of the Finnish National Coalition Party, then President of the Finnish National Coalition Party, and during this period you also acquired an additional European responsibility as Vice President of the European People's Party, a position which you held for 6 years. Then you took over the responsibility of Finance Minister and Deputy Prime Minister of Finland. One says that being a Finance Minister is the best school you can have to become a Prime Minister. This I've several times actually also got from the literature, so to say. And indeed, in 2011, then you became Prime Minister of Finland. I think these were challenging times on the economic side, very challenging times. And I think an additional challenge for you as a Prime Minister, which you mastered exceedingly well, was to manage a governmental coalition of 6 different parties, which surely was not an easy task. And in 2014, then you changed to the European Commission and became their Vice President for Jobs, Growth, Investment and Competitiveness. Now, this is surely one of the key dossiers of the European Commission, and one where ultimately a lot of the credibility of the European Commission and the European construction as such depends upon. Clearly, the question of economic growth, the question of unemployment, how to address the very serious unemployment challenges in several member states, goes to the heart of the future, also of the European construction. I think the initiative Vice President Katainen is most connected with is the investment plan for Europe. I think it's an unprecedented instrument in the history of European integration. The idea to mobilize at least 315 billion euro in terms of additional investment, both public and private sector. I think the European Commission, the current European Commission, will be in the future connected in the history books very much with this initiative, which of course we all hope to be as successful as planned. Now, this plan is sometimes referred to by the media as the Juncker plan, but I think you have been so active in promoting this plan, one could also call it the Katainen plan. But your interests have always extended well beyond the economic sphere, and I was struck to see how often you have emphasized, also when you were Prime Minister, the importance of education. Now, as we are here at a higher education institution, I would just like to quote you, because on the 28th of February, in the European Industry Day, you said that if you would be a dictator of Europe, Your focus would be primarily on harmonizing education to the best level which is available in Europe. I think if one so clearly puts an emphasis on the value of education, then all the more you are very welcome to this institution. So also from this perspective, thanks very much again. And you have chosen to address us on a very large subject, the future of Europe, where you can surely bring in all your expertise, and many thanks for sharing your vision with us about the future of Europe. I pass on the word immediately to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Mr. Rector, actually it's very nice to be here for many reasons, and one of the reasons is that Rector Jyrki KATAINEN used to be my teacher when I was Erasmus student in Leicester, University of Leicester. I was studying EU affairs in UK, and later on I did my master thesis on British Conservatives' EMU policy. You can imagine that I did not agree with them on many issues, but anyway, the topic was very interesting. Another reason why it's nice to come here is that I have always wanted to study here. Maybe I'm a little bit too old now to start studying, but I want to congratulate you all who have an opportunity to be here. I know many friends who have studied here. For instance, my former colleague, former Prime Minister of Finland, Alexander Stubb, who found his wife from here. Also, former Danish Prime Minister Helle Thorning-Schmidt also studied here. They both are my good friends. And if I'm not mistaken, she also found her husband from here. So, not because of this, but also for the good reputation of the university, I always would have liked to study. So I wanted to come here to discuss future of Europe with you. I will give my presentation, but the focus should be in discussion. So I'm expecting lively discussion afterwards, and also challenges and your views, what should be done for the future of Europe. And what are your expectations? If looking 10 years ahead, not 50, but 10 years ahead, what do you expect from Europe? This is what I'm interested in, and this is why I'm here. I try to provoke this discussion, because I will explain after a while why. But as we all know, EU is a very unique creation. The European countries have voluntarily wanted to share part of their sovereignty in order to address challenges which they cannot address alone. And also in order to create opportunities for themselves which they could not create alone. So by handing over part of the sovereignty of a sovereign state, European countries have got a bigger say on the issues which have an impact to their own future. So this is a message which has not gone through, or which only few people are reminding these days, when the idea of integration has been challenged by many. I mean, there are many politicians in Europe who are saying that they want to repatriate sovereignty. And they don't recognize that by handing over part of the sovereignty, you can have a bigger say on issues which will impact to your own life anyway. So what is sovereignty today? Is it sovereignty of being sidelined of decision making? Or does it mean that by handing over so-called sovereignty, which is written on the paper, to the joint pool of sovereignty, you can have a bigger say? So this is a fundamental issue which we have to discuss more in Europe at the moment. Also, EU is a unique creation in a sense that a group of member states, or a group of countries, at the moment 28, but in future 27, are irresponsible of each other. to the extent which you cannot find in anywhere else. Look at Asia or Middle East. You cannot find a similar type of arrangement in which the sovereign states are irresponsible of each other. So one could call this as a union of solidarity. So in that sense, EU, the European arrangements between the countries is very, very unique creation. Problem solving or creating something new is not always nice or fun. If you want to reform your own country or create something new in your municipality, you have to commit to do things which will change the status quo, and changing status quo does not always receive support from everybody. So you must be committed to do something in order to achieve something. The same thing applies when looking at the EU work or work in the EU level. And this is actually the biggest challenge in Europe at the moment. Because for many years now, our owners, European owners, meaning citizens and especially member states, governments or the national parliaments, have not been committed enough to create the future of Europe. Future is always different, it comes, but you can influence to the quality of it. It means that you must be committed to do things which are not always nice or which cannot get or receive maximum support of every single person. As I said, the lack of commitment is the biggest challenge the EU has faced at the moment. One of us, UK, will leave the Union in a couple of years' time. What happens, or what will not happen, is that 27 will continue like nothing would have happened. But what happens is that new EU will be born. EU 27 is different than EU 28. And that's why we need a new direction, a new commitment from the owners of EU 27. Populists are challenging the basic idea of integration. Don't take me wrong, there's nothing wrong to be against European integration. The opinion which says that I don't like integrated Europe, instead I like nationalistic Europe, is as valuable as mine. So I'm not in a position to say that your opinion is wrong and mine is right. But the question is, what do we expect from the future of Europe? Because all the choices have some consequences. Those who are saying that I would like to take my country away from the EU or from the common currency should say that, okay, I'm not envisaging single market. I'm not in favor of defense cooperation. I don't care about, or for me, there's no point to have closer cooperation between authorities addressing terrorism. There's no point to have a joint currency. I'm not interested in freedoms, free movement of people or capital and goods. Or I'm not in favor of the principle of social market economy. So all the choices have some consequences. And if somebody says that I'm against integration in Europe and I don't care things like I mentioned, it's fine. It's completely fine. But we just have to discuss these through, that all the voters understand that my votes really matter. and it will have some consequences. Some populists are also challenging the basic values of Europe. European integration is not only about free trade or in single market. It's a construction which is based on values, like rule of law, which is, by the way, challenged from within at the moment in some member states. It's based on human dignity. It's based on social market economy values, etc. So our creation is much deeper than just economic exercise. Our President Juncker wanted to present a white paper to enrich discussion on future of Europe once the new EU 27 is born. He wanted to present 5 different scenarios instead of one right way forward. The reason why, and I supported him very strongly in this approach, because the reason why we wanted to have options rather than one truth is that we have to make sure that our citizens, our owners, national parliaments and governments discuss with each other and within themselves and create direction and commitment for the new EU. I'm sure some of you have already read through the white paper in which there are 5 different scenarios. The first one is carrying on with full ownership, like the current EU, but renewed ownership. Nothing but the single market option, so let's forget all the rest but concentrate on single market. Third one is those who want to do more, so multi-speed Europe. Fourth is doing less more efficiently, and fifth is doing much more together. So this is the beginning of an honest and open debate on our future. And it's time to bridge the gap between people and between what people of Europe are, what people expect of Europe and what Europe is able to deliver. We expect leaders in Rome this week to launch a formal debate on the options involving the citizens and national parliaments. I'm sure that this university will also discuss about the future of Europe. I mean, I guess you are doing so every single day, but also on the basis of the white paper. Next, I would like to raise 3 different topics which I consider are very crucial for the future of Europe. This is not the exhaustive list of what is important, but just to mention 3 different issues in which we need to find solutions. The first one is defense. Defense is currently one of the most promising areas for the EU to deliver added value for its citizens. Europe faces today growing and complex challenges. There are not just challenges to our security, but to the values on which the EU was built. Respect human rights, freedom, democracy, equality, and rule of law. Europe and its institutions are responding. Europe must ensure its own security. Europeans expect a Europe that protects. For this reason, we are already active on many security files and are reflecting on the future of European defense. A new European security structure is emerging. The High Representative has led this effort with the global strategy. This is matched by a new level of cooperation with NATO. The joint declaration between NATO and the EU signed in Warsaw last July gave a new momentum to our relationship. In addition, to ensure that Europe retains a robust, innovative and competitive defence industry to deliver the capabilities we need, we launched also a European Defence Action Plan. At the heart of the action plan is the proposal to establish a new European Defence Fund. The fund will support investment in joint research and the joint development of defence equipment and technologies. The fund will include 2 complementary windows. The first one is a research window It aims to fund collaborative defence research projects at the EU level, including using the EU budget. The second window aims to support the joint development of defence capabilities agreed by member states in priority areas. It is basically a financial tool for more efficient joint use of public spending in defence. We also aim to exploit the potential of the single market. Today, 80% of defence procurement is still being done on national basis, 80%. Our objective is that all defence-related businesses, whatever the size and wherever they are located in the EU, should be able to benefit from the single market. Another topic which I would like to raise is the future of work. The most important asset for Europe is its people, and we want to do our utmost to help ensure their resilience in times of difficulties and changes. Growth has returned to Europe, and unemployment has now fallen to its lowest level since the Great Recession 2009. However, I am well aware of the challenges the younger generation face in entering the labour market. The question of the future of work is one of the most challenging questions that policymakers face, where the digital revolution, the speed of innovation, new business models and the globalization all have an impact. Jobs have changing and technologies offer great opportunities. Progress will bring benefits if we are ready to embrace new technologies and business models and to make use of them. This basically will mean more jobs, not less. It is true that rapid change may bring sometimes unwanted consequences. Restructuring of professions and industrial sectors, reallocation of labour, and fear of the unknown. Europe needs to provide answers to these issues. We must take a future-oriented approach and prepare ourselves for the new reality of the labour market. This means three things: creating flexible, well-functioning labour market, ensuring sufficient social protection, and building more resilient societies. We will support innovation, competitiveness and the growth opportunities offered by modernisation of the economy. At the same time, it is important to ensure fair working conditions and adequate social protection. Our social protection systems need to be fit for the new forms of work or new business models. Most of unemployment systems do not consider the possibility to do part-time job, join a platform of collaborative economy, or briefly work as self-employed. We need to rethink the way we look at social regulation to ensure that it is fit for modern times while safeguarding the social principles our systems are built on. We are looking at all these issues in the context of the European Pillar of Social Rights. We also need to put more emphasis on people's skills to strengthen the resilience of our citizens with regard to changes. Our skills agenda aims to address this. With the right skills, people can fulfill their potential in the labour market. They become better informed and more engaged citizens and smarter consumers. To prepare people to continue acquiring new skills in a world of more flexible career paths, we need to ensure everyone has access to higher standards of education. In other words, education reforms are needed, mostly in national level, and especially if I was a dictator of Europe, I would put emphasis to the quality of teachers' education, teachers' training, because everything leaves from the quality of teachers. Of course, skills policies fall largely within national and regional competencies, but we want all citizens of Europe to have access to the best opportunities and to have an adequate level of social protection. For this reason, the commitment at EU level is crucial. But it is not enough. Once again, we need clear ownership and clear commitment by national and regional authorities, as well as full support of the social partners if Europe is to succeed. The third and final point is trade and globalization. We are at a time when many stand against what the EU stands for. Openness, international cooperation, and also the freedom to trade on the basis of clear and fair rules. I have said this many times before. Let me say it once again. Protectionism doesn't work. Putting up barriers and building walls is not the answer. There are no easy solutions to complex problems, and those who claim the opposite are not pursuing the well-being of people, but are only seeking to gain more power. Rules-based trade is a source of huge opportunities for European businesses access external markets and for European citizens to have more choice. Protectionism and unilateralism therefore threaten our well-being. The Commission will continue to make the case for multilateralism and for an ambitious EU trade policy based on rules protecting our core values, as well as on the principles of effectiveness and transparency. Let me give you a concrete example. On 15th of February, the European Parliament approved the CETA agreement. CETA sets with Canada. CETA sets new global standards for trade. It shows how to make a progressive and balanced trade agreement, delivering more jobs and economic growth, while protecting our core principles. Sustainable development, workers' rights, safety standards, protection of the environment and of the public interest. Export to Canada already support around 900,000 jobs. More than 70,000 EU companies will now have better and more opportunities. CETA cuts red tape, opens new market in services and public procurement, and protects over 140 European geographical indications. Exporters stand to save over 500 million. And CETA also upholds our standards and protects our values. Both Canada and the EU will implement major international agreement on labour and on the environment. These provisions are ambitious and legally enforceable. This is not the Wild West. This is rules-based, fair and open international trade. Open trade does not and should not mean tolerating unfair practices, like subsidies or dumping. The Commission has proposed a new approach to anti-dumping. We will look at the economic reality in each third country. And when there are distortions like state intervention in the economy, massive subsidies, and cost and price not set by market forces, we are ready to act. So, dear students, ladies and gentlemen, today we are living in a very uncertain world. Uncertainty puts pressure on all of us, on governments and also on the Commission. We at the Commission should be a European anchor for stability. Rule of law, enforcement, rules-based trade, cooperation against external threats, social values, these are our pillars. We will stand strong for our values. The time has come for all of us citizens of Europe, and particularly you guys, young Europeans, to take ownership of Europe. Europe is your continent, and you need to know what you expect from it. Thank you very much.
Many thanks to you, President Katainen, for having given us your vision about the priorities of Europe, for having emphasized some of the fundamentals which should always be very much aware of, for having also encouraged us, which we try to do each day in various capacities, but which we should continue to even expand to ask critically the question, what do we expect from this European construction? Much time is indeed often spent about sometimes ideological debates, what Europe should be or what it is, but crucial is the question, what do we expect from Europe and how can we enable Europe to deliver on these expectations? I think that is clearly a crucial debate which also has to be conducted with citizens, and you have emphasized that here are young citizens of Europe and that they have to live up also to responsibility in this respect. The Vice President has kindly agreed to answer questions and is open to debate. So I would immediately like to open the floor to questions, comments. Who dares to break the ice? It's always the first. Yes, please. You had. Yeah.
Ensiksi haluan sanoa kiitos puheesta ja tervetuloa. Mulla on 2 kysymystä. So first, at the European Industry Days, you spoke about several megatrends, automation, digitization, circular economy, and so forth. I'm wondering, what advice would you give us students and aspiring policymakers to focus on, especially given this rapidly changing world? I mean, this is something that's perhaps not discussed enough even at a higher education. Secondly, if you could have a phone call with the 25-year-old Jyrki KATAINEN, what advice would you give? If you could have a phone call with the 25-year-old Jyrki KATAINEN, what advice would you give?
Should I connect? Yes. Questions, comments? Yes, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. As you know, this promotion is named after Keynes. And in your speech, you've spoken a lot about supply side reforms. But what about the demand side? What could the European Union do more to boost consumption, for instance?
Thanks. Take a final question for the first round. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. The second round.
Hi, I hope that the 4th question is going to be a lady because it's 3 men and I don't think that's okay. But anyways, so yeah, my question was more. So in my thesis, I'm dealing with the European Innovation Council, and I think this is a really important issue that we manage as Europe to come up with companies that are innovative and that can be be at the new economy that is emerging, right? Because when we look at it, we look at so many companies that obviously appear in other parts of the world that in comparison in Europe we don't have that many. And so my question would be, I know that in your paper you announced that in the white paper that you'd have innovation as one of the things you'd like to tackle. But I was wondering what you have in terms of more concrete steps forward apart from the European Innovation Council.
And the ladies' question is.
Hyvää päivää. Thank you for your speech and for having stressed the importance of education. Today we see a huge divergence in education expenditure across member states. So my question is, how can we avoid that this divergence will not lead to a more long-term divergence in productivity?
Thanks very much. For some reason, I have a little bit difficulties to hear your questions. I try to get the point, but the first one was about the topics which should be discussed more, or what it.
Well, I mean, given that we have these megatrends happening,
yeah.
What should aspiring policymakers focus on?
Okay. If I should mention only one, I would raise circular economy. I mean. has anybody heard about circular economy so far? Yes, yeah, there are a few. So circular economy will replace linear economic business models over time, and I believe that it will be the next mega trend in the world market. So more companies than today will replace the linear production or linear business models to become more circular. Without advertising any company here, but there's one Dutch company which is providing lighting, and those pulps seems to be produced by this particular company. So they, in old world, maybe still today, but they produce those pulps. But now they have changed their business model so that they are selling light. So the College of Europe could buy a certain amount of light, and the company is providing light instead of technical equipments. They replace all the broken pulps, and they also pay the energy bill. So there's an incentive for the company itself to prepare so durable and so energy efficient pulp as possible, and they want to get the trash back because they will sell the glass to another producer and the steel parts to another. So part of the business profit comes from selling so-called trash or waste. So it's circulating. And this business model, or these business models, because they make a lot of economic sense. Resource efficiency is a major source of productivity and profit making. So this will take over the current linear models. And we, as a regulator in the European level, should understand what to regulate in order to improve circular economy to flourish, and what not to regulate in order to avoid killing new businesses. So I just give you one example what we are planning at the moment. Look at this plastic bottle. It's made of oil. The oil, let's imagine that the bottle is produced here in Belgium. The oil would have come most probably from Netherlands. Oil comes very easily from Netherlands to Belgium, but try to send this empty, used plastic bottle back to Netherlands from Belgium. It's much more difficult because this is classified as waste when it's empty. And selling waste is much more difficult than selling raw material. So we don't have single market for secondary raw material. We want to change this. And just one example. So I'm working with Chinese quite a lot, and China has put a lot of emphasis to circular economy because they have environmental necessity. We in Europe have environmental necessity, but also because our welfare model is quite expensive, and we want to maintain it. We need to maximize added value and productivity, and that's why circular economy is a good opportunity to finance our welfare, social market economy, and social welfare model in the future. What advices I would give to younger Monsieur Katainen? I most probably would say that, okay, you are already now in Leicester as an Erasmus student. You could look at, if you are not willing to run for the parliament immediately, you could look at other training opportunities. For instance, in the European Commission, Blue Book training could be a good opportunity. Or then just do something in your own continent, because it's so easy, and basically you can work or study in the other countries very easily. So it's investment for yourself. So explore your continent before you decide what you will do with the rest of your life. What EU could do in order to stimulate economy or strengthen demand side instead of supply side? Our budget is so limited, so the European budget is not an answer. What we have tried to do, and we could do this also in the future, is to define fiscal stance of euro area, for instance, looking at what would be the ideal fiscal policy stand when looking at the euro area or the currency union as a whole. We identified this fiscal stance first time this year, and we say that in ideal world 0.5% per GDP stimulus would be appropriate, but we also warned that those countries who cannot afford to do it, they should not do it. Our worry was that when we are saying that 0.5% per GDP stimulus would be appropriate, that those countries who cannot afford start doing, and those countries who can afford don't want to do it. But luckily it didn't happen. For instance, Germany could afford to do more in order to stimulate their own economy, and the spillover effects would benefit the rest. But if Germany and Netherlands and 4 other smaller countries are doing something like this, it doesn't have that big impact to the entire economy. So our tools are quite limited. Investment plan for Europe, EFSI, the European Fund for Strategic Investment, it's kind of stimulus package in the sense that it will crowd in the existing liquidity which is peacefully resting in the bank accounts to the real economy. So we are quarantining part of the private investors' risk, and by doing so we put money to work. And it functions well. EFSI has financed projects so far in 1.5 year time in worth 30 billion, and this is supposed to trigger additional 170 billion investment. But this is kind of a demand side operation, if you want so. EU Innovation Council is moving quite nicely forward. My dear colleague Carlos Moedas, who is in charge of this, is working very hard on this. His idea and our idea is to bring together different innovators in Europe, because our innovation market or innovation landscape is too fragmented. So Innovation Council could put together all the instruments the EU has to offer innovators, and also it could be a platform for different innovation financiers and innovators in Europe. On education expenditures, actually the money used for education is not the only important issue. If you look at, for instance, OECD's PISA study, the country I know the best is doing quite well. And if looking at how much money my country is spending to education, it's less than OECD average country spending to education. I was quite surprised when I saw first time this figure. I was positively surprised, because only the money spent is not, or it doesn't tell the quality of education. So that's why I'm also always speaking so much about the education, because we should, in the Commission, we should put more focus on assessing the education systems of member states, even though the decision making is in the hands of member states themselves, or sometimes, like in Germany, in lenders' hand. But we are not asking more money to education in first stage. This can be done also, but the quality of the education systems is crucial. And this is so-called low-hanging fruit. Imagine if all the teachers in grammar school would have higher university degree on teaching. What a jump in the productivity. This is not the case. There are only a handful of countries in Europe where teachers have been educated in the universities. This is low-hanging fruit. If we want to really improve productivity, competitiveness, but also social justice, let's put more focus on teachers.
Thanks very much for these answers. If I might just add, as you emphasized, of course, very rightly, that Europe's future depends a lot on the added value we can add in production processes, and it's crucial for maintaining our welfare systems. There, of course, is a direct link with education, because if you want to add significant added value, you need highly educated people. And the European Commission, of course, is making efforts on the side to use an education monitor where assessments are made. But if I may say so, I think the European Commission could even be a bit more critical with member states failing on various accounts. I think the education monitor so far is a rather, how shall I say, diplomatic document. Well, you still have a bit of time for a second round of discussion. So, yes, there is one question up there. If you could always say from which program you are and your name, please. Yeah, thanks.
Good afternoon. My name is Farid Safi, and I'm from the Pole Department. I would like to know what the Commission could do to enter more deeply national public debates.
Other question? Yes, please. Here's one question in the front. Thanks.
Good afternoon. I'm Francesca from the Law Department, and I wanted to ask you something more about the Europe of Defense. And as you also spoke about the fact that you're interested in what we want to see as young people of Europe, I'd love to see a Europe which is more solidal with other people. I'm from Italy, for instance, and we have, as Greece, a huge problem with refugees coming. And what concerns me is that we say in official debates that we care for human rights, but on the practical side, sometimes what we do is not enough. So how can we foster, this feeling of belonging to the European Union? Can you think that, also introducing the European Solidarity Corps would be helpful in building a European identity for young people?
So much. The question? Not for the time being, then maybe.
The first question was very tricky one because you ask how Commission could participate to national public debate. Depends on the subject. Sometimes it's quite easy, sometimes it's very difficult. I give you an example of good or easy discussion. For instance, how to stimulate investment in some countries. Everybody is in favor of more investment and job creation stuff, so we can participate in this discussion quite easily. Also, maybe to talk about opportunities, what a single market can offer, or defense cooperation, and also to some extent to advertise the opportunities for the member states. But then, if we are, for instance, we deliberately decided not to interfere to British discussion under or prior to the referendum. Somebody said that we should have interfered. But we have a principle not to participate to the political processes or democratic processes of member states. And I'm maybe too conservative or old-fashioned, but I think that it's better not to. Because the votes are given in some country, and the countries who are taxpayers, they are responsible of consequences of the election results. So I feel that it's a bit difficult from outside to interfere to the discussion, even though there would be a demand for correcting mistakes or giving a second opinion or giving opinion how the others feels the decision. It's not very clear. Another example of this is Polish rule of law situation at the moment, because nobody wants to accuse Polish people of what the government has done. And we try to find a solution together with government, but it's very, very difficult to be represent very calm way the position and participate to public discussion which is overheated. And sometimes we are right or wrong a bit cautious not to create false interpretations by participating to discussions. So in some countries, I'm not referring any particular country, but in some countries have a culture or historical background where foreign powers have interfered to national decision making, and even today, even when the EU is democratically led, rule of law based organization, some people feel that this is something same as what happened 50 years ago. So it's quite difficult. We have to select the wars in which we want to fight. So all the discussions are not always worth participating. Even though, I mean, on the other hand, in some cases we have seen that citizens are expecting us to defend, for instance, rule of law, or part of the citizens are expecting us to defend rule of law more vocally, more loud. And I must admit that this is not always easy to participate in national discussions. On defense issue, as you know, defense does not belong to the EU competence. Basically, Commission does not have any power in this field. But after after the US elections, after Brexit, after what we have seen happening from Russia, or coming from Russia, Russia is becoming more kind of unpredictable than before. Many member states have, and also once we have seen that security threats have changed the shape, or they are different than they used to be. So many member states feels, and citizens also feels, that they cannot afford to take care of their security alone. And that's why member states asked Commission to create tools or vehicles which could improve cooperation between member states on defense sector. And there are two angles. The first angle, which is led by Federica Mogherini, our High Representative Vice President, is the political integration, so to speak. Federica is pushing forward with the support of member states permanent structured cooperation on defense. I very strongly support, and the whole Commission support, her work on this. So basically it will mean that the EU member states will set up arrangements which is more permanent than temporary in nature in the fields of defense. For instance, when we have political, or we want to stabilize some instable country in our neighborhood, we should have tools to use. Tools which we can use in order to stabilize, crisis management tools and administration around it. The second angle, in which I'm in charge together with Elżbieta Bieńkowska, Single Market Commissioner, is the capability angle. So there are three elements. The first one is to use EU budget for joint research, defense research programs. Can you imagine that 90% of all defense research in Europe is done in national level? So basically universities, research institutions, companies which are doing some research relating to capabilities, it's nationally financed. And it doesn't make any sense in Europe. We should put our resources together, and this will be encouraged by the EU budget already this year. The second angle is that once the research has created new information, the project is going to next step to development phase, basically when the company or group of companies are creating prototype. So here again, companies are doing everything alone, but we would like to encourage companies to do things together in order to save money and get better results. And here again, we are looking at the opportunity to use EU budget as a carrot when companies are doing joint pilot projects. And finally, the big money lies in acquisitions. Imagine countries planning to buy jet fighters. Unit costs 100 million euros, and the country needs them 60. How about if two countries would decide to buy jet fighters together? So the unit cost would most probably be lower than when you are buying only alone. So we will create arrangement which will make it easier for member states to do joint acquisitions. So we need better cooperation, both political but also capability cooperation in Europe in order to maximize our security. Thank you.
Very much. I think the time for questions running out, but if I may just abuse my position as chairman to raise a personal one. In the light of your experience, while you have been a head of government of one of the member states, and now, in a sense, you have changed slightly sides because you have a very senior European position now. Do you not sometimes find it a bit frustrating that member states, when there are positive news about Europe, actually ascribe the results to their own efforts on behalf of the citizens? And if there's any problem, it's a problem which comes from the institution or from Europe. The two of us got to know each other first in Leicester, in the United Kingdom, and having spent a lot of time in the United Kingdom, I can certainly testify to the fact that the British government, successive British governments, made very little effort to communicate Europe to citizens. Now, as you are, so to say, at the European Commission, and you have been a former Prime Minister, do you not sometimes encounter a sense of frustration that the member states do not help you with the communication with citizens?
Yeah, actually it was quite frustrating already when I was in my previous job that somebody came to the council saying in the doorstep to the journalist that I came here to defend my national interests. Of course everybody is defending their national interests, but they created a atmosphere or perception that the only reason to come to participate to the event or the meeting is to fight against the others, because the opposite is true. I mean, the creation of European Union was to replace the rule of force by rule of law, and everybody is allowed to participate in the decision making. There is no, I mean, sometimes of course you have to defend your national because of geography or because of some specific situation. You have to defend against somebody's other's opinion, your own national point. But it was repeated over and over again that many people came to fight against the others and maximize the national gain on the joint decisions, that it colored the whole picture of the European integration. That's why we have partially lost the legitimacy and confidence amongst the citizens, because our leaders have communicated, or either they have not said anything, which has sent a signal that EU is not relevant, and if something is not relevant, then you don't care. Or then the communication has been that I came here only to fight against with others. So what's the point? At the same time, the same members or the representatives have deliberately decided to be part of the integration. The money is very warm welcomed, but everybody wants to be very silent when the political power is offered. Because as I said before, if you want to change something or achieve something, you must be committed. Also to fight in your own country, to say, okay, we needed to make a compromise on this, but it led to this decision, which is very good for us. Or then try to explain to your own citizens, okay, our life has gone like this, but it's old-fashioned and we have to accept a new direction, and in the European level we will decide this and that in order to achieve something big. But I would like to end to more positive observation. I just realized this one time when I was in Gulf region. I was meeting several heads of states and ministers in Gulf region, and I realized some years back that this EU thing is quite a nice thing, because I have lots of family friends who are other colleagues from other European countries. We know each other. We are friends. We do things. We sometimes even hobby together, or we have joint hobbies together. We know what is the favorite food of my colleague in Portugal, and he knows when is my birthday, and he's sending text message, and we can just send SMS with each other. So the arrangement has created a family type of atmosphere. Of course, one can say that you are talking as an elite or part of elite. The prime ministers are meeting each other, but this is true. But it's very important that leaders know each other and they care of each other. If they want to harm somebody, they know that I'm harming my friend. So it's very important. And of course, the integration is for all. So that's why my first time when I was away from home, I mean, in another country, it was because of Erasmus. Erasmus gave me an opportunity. My family couldn't have afford to send me abroad to study. So Erasmus gave me an opportunity to be part of this family. And there I realized that, okay, this may be much more than I considered before or realized before, that this continent is also mine. And I must have some responsibility of it. Thank you very much.